Welcome to Garden Sanity. I'm Laura and I garden in Zone 7, Southern New Jersey. Today's video is all about Candytuft, an evergreen perennial with beautiful white flowers that light up the garden in spring. Although it's mainly known for its white flowers, Candytuft also comes in other pastel hues, such as pink, pale amethyst, and purple, but white is the main color that most gardeners grow. So as I mentioned, Candytuft is an evergreen perennial, but some gardeners also consider it to be a subshrub, as it can form a small shrub-like ground cover. Candytuft is also known as Iberis or Iberis Sempervirens. It's part of the mustard family, which includes vegetables like broccoli and radishes, as well as flowers like the annual sweet alyssum. Now here are my reasons why you want Candytuft in your garden. First, it lights up the spring garden. When Candytuft is in bloom, the white flowers cover the plant so you can't even see any green. Just imagine dazzling white color blanketing sections of your own garden before many other perennials begin to grow. My favorite way to describe Candytuft is like alyssum on steroids, as the impact is much larger and more vibrant than sweet alyssum. Candytuft is evergreen, so it keeps its green foliage year-round. This is especially nice to see in the dead of winter when most things are, well, dead or dormant. Candytuft is a reliable bloomer, meaning every spring, like clockwork, this plant adds a wonderful dose of white color wherever you plant it. You never have to worry whether a deep freeze will prevent spring flowers. There's not just one bloom period. Sometimes you'll enjoy another bloom period in the fall. There are several varieties that will rebloom, so check the plant information accompanying each plant when shopping or doing your research online. Now, although the fall blooms are nowhere near the flowering abundance of the spring blooming period, the fall flowers are still quite pretty among autumnal garden colors. Candytuft is a perennial in U.S. zones 3 to 9. This means that once you plant it into the ground, it will return year after year. A great choice economically than all those annuals you've been buying every year. Although don't get me wrong, annuals have their place too. But for long-term enjoyment and less work over time, personally, I prefer perennials. And once Candytuft gets established in your garden, it's truly easy care. Candytuft attracts pollinators, mainly bees and butterflies. It's a non-aggressive spreader and reseeds by itself, which I'll discuss in a moment. It has many landscape uses, such as cascading over rock walls, as a low ground cover or edger, in spring-blooming moon gardens, as a filler in perennial containers, and in fairy gardens. Fairy gardens are in particular cute as the tiny white flowers are the perfect size for miniature gardens. It's a great companion plant to other spring blooming bulbs and flowers, and in the summer it provides a living green carpet in front of taller perennials and summer flowering shrubs. And my last reason is that Candytuft is both deer and rabbit resistant. However, keep in mind that animals will eat just about anything if they're hungry enough and their usual food sources are scarce, especially in winter. Now I deal with rabbits trying to enjoy my garden beds, to put it nicely. And they've never touched my Candytuft, thank goodness. So next I want to go over the growing requirements for Candytuft, and after that I'll discuss seedlings, dividing and propagating, pruning, the growth rate as well as spreading and reseeding, what causes Candytuft to turn yellow, and finally different varieties of Candytuft and where to buy them. Now the hardiness zone is US zones 3 to 9, and that's a pretty wide range. You can plant it in full sun to partial shade. Now in full sun, make sure the plants have enough moisture. And in more shade, just know that there might not be as many flowers. While Candytuft blooms its best in full sun, here in southern New Jersey where the summers are ultra hot and humid, I find that it does best planted in front of, and sometimes slightly underneath, shrubs and taller perennials that provide partial afternoon shade during the hot summer months. For example, in this garden bed, the white flowers bloom in full sun in spring. However, in the summer when the sun is a lot stronger, the plants are partially shaded by the knockout roses, which will keep them quite happy. Candytuft likes water, but doesn't want to drown in it. The roots are shallow and it spreads along the ground, so make sure to water new plants frequently during the first growing season, especially if planted in full sun when the temperatures rise. And even once established, Candytuft enjoys a good amount of water. Now, here's where I personally failed with Candytuft, with both watering and the amount of sunlight. Years ago, I planted some Candytuft in our lamppost bed, thinking it would be fine as there's sprinkler irrigation in the bed. The plant looked nice in spring, but very quickly looked horrible during the summer, and no amount of water seemed to help as the plant got way too baked by the sun. It needed to cool off in some shade. So, if you live in a warmer climate zone, say zones 7, 8, and 9, make sure your Candytuft gets some partial shade from the worst of the sun during the summer months. And that's the same thing with growing Candytuft in containers. It will need a good amount of water and some protection from afternoon sun. Okay, let's move on to soil. Well-drained alkaline soil is best. So if you're starting a new garden bed and have heavy clay soil that stays wet in winter, amend the soil before doing any planting. By simply mixing in composted cow manure and top dressing the soil with organic mulch, that's going to really help improve the soil even before you plant one single plant. The main thing to remember is never, never, never amend the soil, in other words, adding in compost, for example, at the same time you are planting. Don't dump any compost in the planting hole. Your new plants are best planted in your current existing soil. Now, Biotone starter fertilizer is the only thing I add mixed into each planting hole to help the roots get established. Organic mulch, such as shredded wood chips, breaks down over time, benefiting the soil. And remember, good drainage is important. Regarding planting perennials, I have a video that I call Planting Perennials the Easy Way. And in that video, I discuss composted cow manure, so I will link to that video at the end of this one for you. So you want to use a fertilizer that is low in nitrogen because too much nitrogen will result in more green leaves and not as many flowers. I use a Spoma plant tone, and it's a slow-release organic fertilizer. You only need to apply this fertilizer in early spring, working it into the soil around each plant, and no additional fertilizer is necessary for the rest of the season. Now I want to talk a bit about seeds and seedlings, dividing, and propagating. Candytuft can be grown from seed, best started indoors or in pots outside in warmer temperatures. Seedlings can be planted into the garden, spaced approximately 10 inches apart. These small plants will fill in over time, growing into each other and becoming a beautiful evergreen carpet. What's interesting is that most gardening books I've read mention that the original Candytuft perennials that you plant in your garden will eventually die out after maybe 5 or 6 years. However, you won't really notice this because Candytuft reseeds itself. In other words, it drops its seeds right there around itself and generates new plants. And for me, so far my own plants have been in my foundation beds for about 10 years. And I can't tell you which might be the original plants versus more recently self-seeded plants. But as long as the Candytuft's happy, I'm happy. So can you divide Candytuft plants? No, because the roots are shallow, so the plants can't be easily divided at all. However, since tiny seedlings will pop up here and there in your garden, you can just transplant those seedlings to another area of the garden. But just be very careful, as their roots are going to be tiny. I've planted tiny seedlings in pots first, and then let them grow for a season. After that, I transplant them into the garden once they're a more respectable size. Now, you can take cuttings of Candytuft to propagate, either dipping one end of the cutting into rooting hormone and planting it in a small pot, or sticking the cutting in a glass of water on your windowsill and simply letting the roots develop that way. However, my own opinion is this. Once you grow Candytuft, you'll begin to recognize what the seedlings look like. And like I said, it's just as easy to plant those in small pots, giving yourself a head start to having more plants in your garden. Okay, now let's go over pruning Candytuft. Now, deadheading Candytuft is the same as pruning Candytuft, and sometimes it's also called shearing Candytuft. So yes, you can prune Candytuft after it's finished blooming in early summer, usually when you notice the seed pods forming. I prune mine every year, but I leave some seed pods on the plants for possible new plants to sprout up. I made a helpful video where I demonstrate exactly how to prune your Candytuft, so I'll link to that at the end of this video for you. So how fast does Candytuft grow? On average, each plant will spread up to 12 inches high and up to 18 inches wide within approximately 2 years. And please note that different varieties may have different heights and spreads, so pay attention to the plant tag when shopping. As an example, here's what Candytuft looked like in a former garden bed I used to have. And here's the same plants just 2 years later, grown together and much more lush. Please note, it doesn't take long until you have something so pretty. And how fast does Candytuft spread? Candytuft fills out nicely and spreads in a subdued way that you'll be happy with. It spreads via its roots, and also some stems will dip back down into the soil and form roots and pop up new plants from there. The spread is non-aggressive. Now, why is my Candytuft turning yellow? Well, there's 2 main reasons. First, if you leave the seed pods on Candytuft, the plant will go into somewhat of a weakened state as the plant works on developing the seeds rather than new growth. So you'll see some yellowing stems and leaves. You normally see this with many summer flowering perennials in autumn, when the plants wind down for the season and begin dropping seeds. But since Candytuft is a spring flowering perennial, you're going to see this occur in early summer, especially if the plants aren't pruned back. Now, the second reason Candytuft could turn yellow is that Candytuft requires some shade in the hottest areas, like I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, it'll dry out no matter how much water it's receiving. Again, the best success for me has been providing these plants with a bit of afternoon shade using neighboring shrubs and perennials. So there's many varieties of Candytuft, and quite frankly, I don't even know the variety I planted as I can't find the plant tag, unfortunately. But honestly, I've never seen a bad Candytuft variety. Nonetheless, I've compiled a short list of Candytuft varieties for you in the description box below this video. It's by no means a complete list, but it should help you get started on your own search. You can start Candytuft from seed, and you'll also find Candytuft plants for sale in early to mid-spring when it's in bloom. Plant and seed catalogs are a great resource, as is your local garden nursery, because they're going to know exactly what grows best in your specific area, so definitely ask them for advice. In addition to your local garden nursery, Candytuft is readily available in spring at many of the big box garden centers like Home Depot, Lowe's, and Walmart. And here's 3 of my favorite places to purchase perennials online. Bluestone Perennials, which is based in Ohio, which also has a print catalog, rareroots.com, which is based in Virginia, and greatgardenplants.com, which is based in Michigan. Now I'll link to each of these places in the description box below. So I hope this video helps you decide whether Candytuft is right for your own garden. And don't forget to watch this video about pruning Candytuft. And this video, where I show you how to plant perennials the easy way and discuss composted cow manure. So until next time, happy gardening.